A storm was approaching. I could see the dark clouds cluster in the distance as the cold breeze swept through the forest. The trees trembled under the force of the incoming breeze as the sound of thunder echoed in the distance. I had picked up high levels of radiation in the heart of Lockwood Forest, and from the look of it, whatever was buried deep in the earth was definitely worth digging up. My radiation detector device was all over the place, and despite warnings of an incoming storm, my shovel deepened into the earth and began to dig. The clouds soon descended as rain started pouring. Just as my shovel came into contact with something within the earth, I had finally gotten closer to my prize, and this gave birth to a sudden burst of energy. I began to dig faster. My eyes were soon greeted by a strange sight. "What in the world?" I exclaimed. I instantly jerked back in shock. I had spent decades as a researcher, and I was confident that whatever I had just seen was definitely not from this world. My heart raced faster as I shifted my gaze back to the strange fossil. I needed to get this immediately to my laboratory. Somewhere in the universe, an unidentified object can be seen heading towards the Earth with unreal speed. It looks like some sort of spaceship. Carl does a double take at a screen. To be sure, he was not seeing things. He had been working at the Space Control Center for a while, but this was unlike any strange object he had seen before.
"Sir, I think you need to see this."
Carl's voice echoed throughout the room. "Keep a close watch on the objects. If you notice anything strange, report instantly to HQ." A husky voice replied.
"Yes, sir."
The storm had calmed, and I was able to unearth the sinister-looking fossil. I was now moments away from making a groundbreaking discovery. Several thoughts strolled across my mind's eye. I stormed into the military research lab. I carted away the strange fossil towards my laboratory, responding to several salutations at intervals as I continued down the path. I could sense several curious eyes staring at me, but I was not bothered. I had a great task ahead, and time was not a luxury that I had. The evening sun cast an orange hue across the sky as darkness began to creep in slowly. One thing was certain: I wasn't going to sleep until I completed my research. The fossil was at least 7 feet tall, with indescribable features and several extended appendages protruding from different parts of its body. A spherical structure that seemed like its head set above its distorted body. Right from my childhood, I had always been interested in xenobiology, the speculative biology of extraterrestrial life forms, and despite several remarks from a few of my colleagues in the military, I furthered my research even after joining the Army. I had taken several samples from the fossil, and had already begun to process my findings when I drifted into oblivion. I was, however, drawn back from my oblivious state by the beeping sound of one of the machines. I was right. The fossil was definitely not from this planet, but that wasn't what caught my attention. The results also revealed that whatever I have just dug out from Lockwood Forest was older than mankind itself. It predated back to the age of the dinosaurs. I ran the investigation again several times to be sure, but the results all came out the same. Every time I stared at the results in shock. We were not the first inhabitants of the Earth. Something else walked the length and breadth of the Earth before we ever came into existence. Something massive and totally different from us. Something alien. It's not like it mattered anyway. I was proud to have made such a groundbreaking discovery. But these creatures were most likely extinct, and this discovery will probably end up in some museum downtown. But now I know that we might not just be the only ones in the universe. I needed to get some sleep. I took a quick glance at the alien fossil before strolling out of my laboratory. Everyone in the Space Control Center held their breaths as they stared at the strange disc-like structure, which hovered in the large screen right in front of them. They had been monitoring the strange object since it gained entry into our stratosphere, and it was now obvious that there was something strange about this particular unidentified flying object. It strolled across the sky like it had a mind of its own. Was this some sort of weapon of war by a nation? Rumors spread like wildfire, but every nation denied involvement. Only a few people knew where the strange object had come from.
"What do we do now, sir?"
Coral asked curiously, fear evident on his face. "We wait. We are not sure about..." I was still speaking when the unidentified flying object came to a sudden halt on the coast of Riverland Village. It was definitely an alien ship. Carl trembled in fear as he thought of what could probably happen next.
"This is not good,"
he stammered. Every news channel in the world was talking about the strange object which descended from the heavens, but so far no attack had been launched. Well, not until now. Suddenly an ominous noise emanated from within the spaceship, as a powerful surge of energy pulsating around it. I was glued to the TV, which hung calmly on the wall in my office, stunned at the sudden turn of events. My military uniform glittering under the fluorescent light.
Logan.
I shifted my gaze towards the source of the sound.
We need to go now.
It was my colleague. If this was really what I thought it was, then no one was safe. I was about to leave my office when the surge of energy that had been pulsating around the strange object suddenly erupted throughout the coast of Riverside Village, and scores of sinister-looking creatures emerged from within, like the disc-like object. I have never seen these creatures before, but I will recognize their unique biology anywhere. They are very similar features to the fossil I had unearthed just a few days ago. Could this be a coincidence? I asked myself. I silenced my thoughts immediately. Now was no time for unnecessary debates as I immediately grabbed my gun and stormed out of my office. Whatever just came up from that ship was definitely not a friendly next-door neighbor. I had a duty to protect my country at any cost. Coral. They didn't need any more sides. It was an alien invasion. It sounded like some sort of fantasy tale, but it wasn't. It was real. In the midst of the growing chaos, a familiar voice echoed in the control hall of the Space Mission Control Center.
Carl, get the president on the line.
I was very close to the coast of Riversideville, so I was at the forefront of the war. Nothing seemed to make sense, but it was no time to use our heads. We fought with everything we had. The aliens were totally not friendly. They launched everything they had, but we fought back hard. Luckily, our weapons could pierce their thick flesh. They were repelled with heavy force. Their attack was contained. The Battle of Riversideville lasted for about a week before we were able to take down their ship. We might have won the battle, but the new revelation that we were not alone in the universe haunted every mother and child. The aliens hovered in the air with multiple extensions beside their bodies. They launched their attacks through several pores on their bodies, which shut out acid-like substances and disintegrated anything upon contact. Luckily for me, I was permitted to run experiments on one of the captured aliens. I had the license to do as I wanted. Firstly, I ran bone samples and realized that I was right. It was a perfect match to the fossil I had dug up from Lockwood Forest just a few days ago. Perhaps they had been to Earth before, or maybe they were the first inhabitants of the Earth. Either way, they had been around a long time before, man. What if they just wanted their planet back? I asked myself. What if this ship was just a scouting party to check out what was on Earth? How did they communicate? Several questions began to stroll across my mind as I drifted into oblivion. If they had been on the Earth before, man, then there was only one thing that would bring them back. They wanted their planet back. I informed my superiors, and a few of them saw some wisdom in my words, and I advised them to be ready for another invasion. Various conspiracy theories begin to circulate the internet about the origin and intention of the aliens, but I fear that none of that might matter. They decided to return for another invasion. 2 weeks after the previous attack, something appeared like stars in the midnight sky. We wanted to doubt it, but we all knew what it was. The aliens were back, and this time they had returned, prepared for war. My fears had become reality. World leaders met to discuss the best way to tackle the incoming threat. They resolved to be the first to launch an attack. It was already clear that the aliens had not come in peace. They had brought their entire species, which indicated that they had no plans of losing the war. Earth had never been faced with such a situation before. We had just found out that we were not alone in the universe. Just a few weeks ago, and now we were at the brink of war and total extinction from an alien species. We fired several missiles toward them, but they all exploded before even getting close to them. They seemed to have surrounded themselves with a powerful force field, and this seemed to pose a more tasking situation. We needed another plan, and we needed a plan fast, as the aliens were still descending into Earth's orbit. The spaceship soon entered the Earth, and the aliens were released into the Earth. The aliens had come to a halt, hovering exactly where their previous spaceship had also been. That was where their mothership had decided to perch. very closely to Riverside Village. And once again, I was at the forefront of the war. War had broken out all around the world, and every continent in the world was at war. It was very difficult for other countries that were not affected by the first invasion directly, and the death toll soon began to increase. Never has the world experienced an invasion as terrible as this. We had lost too many men in a very short time, and the war seemed endless. We were losing and something had to be done. The mothership was almost impenetrable, but we had an alien in our hold. The alien was going to be our passport into the mothership. I had studied their species for quite some time, and through my knowledge of the aliens, we blocked off its communication ports and using advanced drones. We carried the alien creature very close to the portal, and it responded and gave way. That was our chance. We launched several missiles through the open space and towards the mothership. For my research, I discovered that all the aliens were connected to their queen, resided within the mothership. Most of the missiles which were shot in were destroyed, but one made it through. I made a discovery that could change the course of the war, but I was going to need a lot of firepower to help me get close enough to execute my plan. I knew a friend who could get to the president in the advent of war. Prices had to be paid. Carl invited me to speak with a few of his colleagues, and if I could convince him about my plan, and they might just be able to grant me an audience with the president of Riversideville. It's just like in the movies, I began. I could spot Coral listening in the distance. Their queen is like the source of life and existence. If we can take out their queen, they're all going to definitely fall, I said.
And how do you know that?
Coral asked. Curiously, several missiles were fired at the queen, weakening the force field around her. One of the missiles accidentally found its way into her nest and came in contact with her. All the aliens seemed to feel the pain simultaneously. If only we could get close to her, close enough and detonate a nuclear bomb in her nest. I'm positive that it should work. Somehow I prayed in my heart that they listened to what I was saying.
And who would do that? We all know that whoever strolls into that place would not come out alive.
One of the men in the room asked curiously. I will, I replied instantly. An instant decorum engulfed the entire room as everyone stared at me with surprise. After a brief moment, they finally decided to break the silence.
All right, then we'll make the call.
The queen's nest was as big as the size of a stadium. I had taken the offer. Someone needed to get close enough to the queen for the bond to be very efficient, and I had decided to take that seat. Everyone had given me a salute of respect before I embarked on the mission, and here I was alone in the chopper, preparing to jump from above into the belly of the beast. I would say it was an honor to have served my nation, and so my last breath. I heaved a heavy sigh before jumping off the chopper and into the queen's nest. I could hear several melodies ringing in my ears. It was truly an honor. I descended into the queen's nest, and when I got close enough, I pulled the trigger. Blinding light filled the entire place as the queen gave a dying scream, like the sands on a seashore, a swim of soul, swimming in pace.